When marriage equality first happened in Australia, my husband and I were the first to get divorced. We had tried for 3 years to get divorced and failed every year. I married an Englishman, and under English law, the English will let you get married anywhere. Any little handkerchief of country they think is the mother country, you can get hitched. But getting divorced is another matter. Now, I did a bit of research and I found out that in England, they still had divorce by fault. So someone had to be found at fault, okay? So the quickest route to getting divorced was to declare unfaithfulness. Until I looked at the divorce laws in England and realised that they only defined unfaithfulness as being having sex with a member of the opposite sex. I last tried that in 1995. I think Andrea might still have been cleaning blue metal at that time. Let's just say I quickly lost interest in being unfaithful. Not in my craziest moments, when I got married, did I think that 10 years later I would say goodbye to my husband and I'd see him for the last time when he entered a Buddhist order. Nor did I think that I would walk naked into the Indian Ocean with 800 naked Western Australians in a Guinness Book of Records attempt at the world's largest skinny dip, which we won for one summer before the Kiwis trumped us. Nor did I think I would ever contemplate having heterosexual sex, but then who does? I was married on Friday. Oh, come on. I was married on Friday, February the 8th of 2008. Well, truth be known, it was Friday, February the 8th and February the 9th because my husband was English and Hindu, and no self-respecting Hindi gay boy has a marriage that doesn't straddle at least 2 days. Our families didn't respond to our wedding invitations that we sent them. His family are devout Hindu and mine are devout Tasmanian. But at least they couldn't say that they didn't know that their boys were getting married. Now, the civil ceremony was on the 3rd level of a building at the Paris Street end of Collins Street in Melbourne, if anyone knows Melbourne at all, at the UK Consulate General. And we walked into a big hall where the door was being held open by this, really excitable little blonde-haired bombshell who just stood there and held the door open whilst we all walked in, kind of jiggled at the door. And the Assistant Consul General actually that day officiated at our wedding ceremony, which he did so with a vengeance. When I'm quite tall, when the small, uneasy, clearly uncomfortable little bald man walked in and introduced himself, gave me a little laminated card and said, "You can say this and only this." And I looked at the card, took it off him, and I looked at the card and it said, "I, Gary David Steadman, know no reason why I should not register a civil partnership with you under section whatever it was of the Civil Partnerships Act of the UK 2004. Well, I turned and looked incredulously at the little man beside me. I handed it back to him and said, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say this. And I turned to my husband and I said, I love you. Let's grow up and grow old together. Whatever awaits us in life's journey, I will stand beside you, and I will never take for granted the joy of sharing this life. I took the ring out of my pocket that my husband had bought for himself for a wedding ring. It was massive. I used to call it the papal signet ring. It really used to piss him off. It was this massive chunk of silver with a big bit of blue resin in it. You know what I mean. Anyway, so I took it out of my pocket and went to put it on his finger, and it looked magnificent. He had brown skin, and I'll never forget the look of his hand. He had elegant little fingers like tiny little Carnarvon bananas. But as I went to put it on his hand, the Consul General took hold of my hand and the ring and said, you can't do that in front of me. You can do that after I've left. Well, after the silly little twat had left the room, the little blonde-haired girl that had been standing at the back holding the door all the time, she ran up to the front, hugged us both, and in pretty incomprehensible English accent, I think it was Geordie, I'm not even going to try and do this, so I'm just going to do something that kind of sounds a bit English. She kind of went up and she said, oh, I love it when you boys get married. You're the 63rd couple to register a wedding in Melbourne. And oh, look, I'm sorry I had to stand at the back. But you see, under English law, we can only hold these ceremonies in public places. And I thought, well, we're on the 3rd floor up above Collins Street. Well, I figured, well, someone has to hold the door open because that'll make it public. So don't worry about him. He's always like that. I'm the one who made your marriage legal. The pictures taken of us that afternoon show me, my husband, and right behind us, this life-size portrait of the Queen. There's me, Queen Elizabeth II, and my husband, all three of us smiling into the afternoon sun. Now, the next day, we had a wedding party at our house, and our friends turned up in droves. Oh dear, that's a bit of a shame, that drink's gone. Well and truly, never mind. Where was I? Yes, so our wedding party. No one dropped their drinks at my wedding party. It was in Wood End in Victoria, and we decided that we would repeat our vows in front of all of our friends and include some elements of a Hindu wedding ceremony from my husband's culture. And so he put a garland of marigolds over my head and touched my forehead with a little bit of red ochre mixed with oil. One of my dearest friends is here that was with me that day. Now, we had our own royalty that night in the I was going to say the congregation, God. At the party, you know, Deepa was at La Trobe Uni with my husband, and she was a PhD student, and she was actually fairly aristocratic and from Nepal, and was not known to take a back seat in anything she did, with perhaps the exception of her PhD, which was alleged that she had ghost-written. Now, as I put the garland over my husband's head and touched my finger, my left finger, index finger, in the mixture of oil, the ochre paste, which is a real no-no in Hindi culture, but I was nervous, all right? Anyway, Deepa was heard to whisper very, very loudly to no one in particular, oh my gods, basically he's just put shits on his husband's forehead. My godson, Oliver, aged 4, drunk on orange cordial and potato chips, managed to persuade Tara, who he'd met a half an hour before, Tara was 5, managed to persuade Tara to pull her knickers down behind the bungalow at the bottom of the shed that night and then pull his down. Now, aside from that and dealing with their parents, our wedding party went off without a hitch. But when you get married, you know, there were so many things you just don't know, for those of you who've given it a go. You know, I didn't know that day that my husband, in asking him to come and live in rural Victoria with me and leave the city behind, he'd lived in London, New York, Melbourne, and then I put him in Woodend. He was the only guy with brown skin there. We did not know that he was allergic to every bit of grass, pollen, flower. He'd walk out of the house and he'd just go boom. I didn't know that his Gujarati mother had trained him so well to take control of the kitchen that I would not enter a kitchen for 10 years. I wasn't allowed to. And to this day, my partner's in the audience, he can tell you in the break, I don't cook. I probably won't cook again in my entire life. I didn't know that in his 50th year, that I would become dark and icily depressed for 3 months, unable to work, and leaving my husband absolutely terrified and utterly alone. I didn't know that that when he was at his first ordination retreat, that I would get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning from London to tell me that my husband's father had died unexpectedly, and I would sit for an hour in the icy dark before I called him to tell him that his father had passed away. I didn't know that loving someone, that love is delicate and terrifying, and that it's about being brave every day, about the truths that you're prepared to tell each other, that, you know, perhaps one thing that I did know, or I think we both knew, that in life there are so few people that are prepared to go that hard journey with you. And for my part, I'm still so very grateful and glad that we did. Thank you.